Before you is a 1949 Ferguson TO-20. I picked this up from a guy on Facebook Marketplace, and he advertised it as yard art. And so, who knows when the last time it's been running. It has a lot of moss on it. It's been sitting for probably 15 or 20 years at least. And so my first order of business is to see if the engine will actually turn over, which I'm assuming it won't, but you never know. The previous owner told me that he had put oil in the cylinders at some point. He actually bought the property with his tractor on it. And so I don't know if he was trying to maybe see if he could get it running or not. But he did put oil in the cylinders sometime in the last several years. This is quite a bit different than my TO-35. I could fit a socket onto the crankshaft bolt, but this either has an adapter for a hydraulic pump or it's just got a strange nose on the crank damper. Well, let's just pry on this bolt here. Nope. Cheap pry bars are, I guess, you get your money's worth. I'm going to go ahead and take the hood off. My other tractor didn't have this, and I'm hoping it's just a pump coupler that I can pull off and then get to the nut on the crankshaft. It turned. It turned. Wow. Oh, look at that. Still gonna take this thing off because I don't think it belongs. Guess I'll find out. Yep. There's the bolt. But I don't need it anymore. Yeah, I think that's just a pump coupler. Must have had a hydraulic pump on the front at some point. It rolls over way too easy though. The cap was off of this when I bought it. And this dust cover was also off. So it's all rusty down in here. That's going to need some help too. A lot. Ugh. And there's no coil. Start switch is down here on the bell housing. So one cable would go from the battery down to one side of the switch, and then the wire to the starter motor goes to the other side. But I'm touching just these two wires, and the starter doesn't appear to be working. That will be the next thing to come off. There's a little punch mark here. I'm assuming it lines up with that stud to get it back on the same direction. Starter's all apart, and I have found the problem. The lug on the outside goes through to the inside, and I don't know if the camera picks this up, but there are two bars, copper bars, that go over to the lug, and looks like they're just soldered on, and so at some point somebody has loosened this nut and twisted that so the solder broke, and so I'm going to have to resolder those two things back on. I finished soldering these two bars onto this lug, and it looks pretty good. I think it's going to hold. I loosened the outside nut so I could raise the bolt up off the surface here so it didn't transfer so much heat into the housing. And all I used was a, let's see, what is this, 260 watt soldering gun, and just held it on there for several minutes and was able to get the solder to melt. I think it's going to work fine. Starter's back in place. Here's the moment of truth. It works! Hey! Wow. That's exciting. I have the distributor out of the Ferguson TO-20, and it's a little worse for wear. The previous owner had taken the cap and dust cap off, and so this thing has had water inside of it. I'm going to clean it up as best I can and see if we can't get it working again. Oh, it's not really a pretty sight in there, but I guess it could be worse. I got the distributor cleaned up as best I could. I couldn't get the shaft, or I didn't want to try to get the shaft out. It rotates well inside the housing, so I'll put it all back together and test it out. Isn't that a thing of beauty? Got a new O-ring put on there. The old one's almost hard as a rock. Oh, there, it just broke. Won't be using that one again. Okay, where do we want this? Coil stud should be over here. Figured out where top dead center was on number one. I held my thumb over the hole and turned it over until I got compression. And then there's a hole down here in the engine block that goes back to, you can see the flywheel, and there are timing marks on the flywheel. And I turned it back to about 8 degrees before top dead center. And I put the distributor back in and pointed the rotor towards number one. So now I need to rotate this around until the points just start to open. I picked up a starter switch off the internet for this The old one was not working anymore, and somebody had actually put in an electric solenoid. So I took that out and wired up the battery to the original starter switch again. And so now it starts with the gear shift lever. So you pull it up and go all the way over to the right and go forward. And then that engages that starter button and puts juice to the starter motor. You can't get to the start position unless you pull up the shift lever. So now you can get through gears 1 through 4 in here, but you have to pull up to either go to reverse or over to the start position. And now I'm going to see if we have spark. It's the original points and points condenser, cap rotor. I don't know if the camera will pick that up. I'm going to turn the lights off. And move way in here. There's the spark plug. Give the coil some power. I did see some sparks, but I don't know if the camera picked that up. But we have spark. Since all the plugs are out, I'm going to do a compression test on all the cylinders. Uh, 65, that's not so good. That one is 90. $100. And 80. Put spark plugs in. I think I have it timed right. I sprayed a little carbon choke cleaner in the carburetor. We'll just see if it pops off at all. That is the exhaust pipe. I'm hoping that gets blown out when the engine ever starts. But the next thing I need to focus on, I think, is the carburetor. Because that is, the governor mechanism is stuck. So that's going to be the next thing I work on. That is the throttle plate in the carburetor, and it's got some goodies stuck in the side there. It's a good thing I pulled it off. Mud daubers, it looks like. Good as new. Well, almost good as new. This screw is bent. I had a hard time getting it past the exhaust or the intake manifold flange. That is very nasty in there. Got the carburetor apart, and most things are in fairly decent shape. I can clean them all up. Might help to turn the key on just a bit. I believe it fired. See that little fern? That has been growing out of the exhaust pipe for a while. So I guess when it starts, what should happen? That should pop out, right? Right? Let's see. Still there? What? Not sure where I left off last time. It's been about a week, well, at least a week, since I worked on this. I'll recap, I guess. New plugs, new plug wires, new cap, and I believe rotor. The original points and condenser are still in. I have a 6-volt coil. I put in a new starter switch down here to work with the shifter. So rebuilt the carburetor as well as I could. It was super nasty inside, so I still don't know if I got it all clean. Why did you stop? I believe I found the problem. This is the inlet to the carburetor. It's got a little screen on the end that it looks very clean. I happened to pop this off and found a bit of goo in the inlet of the filter. I believe that's the problem. Clean that up and it should run well. I think I have the carburetor issue figured out now, so put a little fresh gas in, see how it goes. That is fantastic. Wow. Sounds like the generator bearings are really bad though. That sounded pretty rough. This is cool. I gotta just start it up again. No water in it, so I can't run it a long time. Yay!